My name's Mabel. I've been married to Arthur for what feels like forever, and most of that time has been spent raising our son, Dylan. From the beginning, we wanted the best for him. We scrimped and saved, hoping he'd grow up strong, smart, and independent. But you know what they say about best-laid plans. Dylan was a handful as a teenager, always getting into something. Every time he came home, whether sheepish or smirking, I was there to make sure it didn't break him or us. Arthur would shake his head, saying I was too soft on him. "You love him too much. You're spoiling him," he'd say. But I'd just laugh it off. Love doesn't spoil someone, Arthur. It builds them up. But here we are. Dylan's 30 and still not quite built up. We paid a fortune for a good education, hoping he'd find his footing. But no luck. Girls and parties caught his interest more than any textbook or job. He graduated, but you wouldn't know it from where he's at now. Job hopping like it's his career and still relying on us to keep a roof over his head. Arthur and I, we're not young anymore, but we still work part-time. Every penny we make, we save, thinking about a decent pension because who knows how long we'll be bailing Dylan out. We've paid off our mortgage, and we pinch every penny, only spending on what's necessary. And Dylan, he drops by most nights, hungry and broke. "Hey, Mom, got anything to eat?" he'd ask as soon as he walked in, without even a "how are you?" I'd always have something on the stove. "Sit down, I'll fix you a plate." "But Dylan, you can't keep doing this. When are you going to get serious about a job? Settle down a bit." He'd just shrug, shoveling food like he was trying to fill a void. "Jobs are tough, Mom. Nothing sticks. Don't worry, something will come up." Arthur would be at the table too, muttering into his coffee, "You need to stop making it so easy for him, Ed. He's got no reason to change, not while the meals keep coming." Then, one evening, Dylan came home with news. "Mom, Dad, I met someone." His eyes were lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Oh," I managed, my heart bouncing between hope and fear. "Her name's Fiona. I think she's the one," he said, beaming. The day Dylan brought Fiona home, I had a gut feeling things were about to change, for better or worse. He had that look in his eyes, like he finally figured something out. And there she was, smiling and pretty, trailing behind him as if stepping into a whole new world. "Mom, Dad, this is Fiona," Dylan introduced her with a wide grin, standing tall like he was showing off a grand prize. Fiona reached out her hand, her grip firm and confident. "It's so lovely to meet you both," she said. Her voice was smooth, almost rehearsed, but it was nice to hear someone speak so kindly to us. Arthur, always the skeptic, peered over his glasses at her. "Hello. I heard you're from around town. What do you do?" "I work at my family's store," she replied without hesitation. "It keeps me busy, but I love the hustle." "Well, that's good. Keeps you grounded," Arthur said, trying to read between the lines. I nudged him softly, giving him a look to keep it light. We sat down in the living room, Arthur and me on the couch, Dylan and Fiona in the armchairs across from us. I wanted to keep things welcoming but also get some real talk going. "So, Fiona," I started casually, "Dylan tells us you two met at the community center. How did that happen?" Fiona laughed, a clear, ringing sound. "Oh, it was at the annual charity ball. I was helping at the ticket booth, and Dylan came up, all lost, asking for directions to the buffet. I showed him the way, and we just clicked." Dylan nodded, his face lighting up at the memory. "Yeah, and I kept finding reasons to pass by the booth after that." I glanced at Arthur, who was trying to hide a smirk. "Sounds like Dylan," he muttered under his breath. Dinner was ready, so we moved to the dining table. The conversation flowed more easily there, with the sound of plates clinking and glasses being filled. Fiona relaxed and began sharing her dreams of starting her own business someday. That's ambitious, Arthur said, passing the potatoes. Yeah, well, you only get one shot at life, right? Might as well make it count, Fiona replied as she served herself. I admired her spirit, but part of me worried about what that meant for Dylan. He'd always been content to drift along, not one for planning ahead. I looked at him closely, and he seemed genuinely happy. Maybe Fiona's drive would rub off on him. After dinner, while Arthur and Dylan cleared the table, a rare sight, I pulled Fiona aside for a heart-to-heart. Listen, Fiona, I began quietly. Dylan's my only son, and I just want the best for him. He can be a bit of a dreamer, with his head in the clouds. Fiona nodded, her eyes soft. I know, Mabel. He's told me a lot about how you both supported him. Don't worry, I'm not here to take him away from that. I'm here to build something with him. Her words were reassuring, but I needed to be sure. And you think you're ready for everything that comes with him. It's not always going to be easy. She squeezed my hand, her determination clear. I'm not going anywhere, Mabel. I'm in this for the long haul. It was what I needed to hear, but only time would tell. I hugged her, feeling a mix of relief and lingering worry. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something good for my boy. A year later, Dylan and Fiona got married. The ceremony was simple, nothing extravagant, but full of hope. They moved into a rented apartment nearby. Arthur and I paid for their honeymoon, a little getaway to the coast. To give them a good start, we also gave them a piece of land near us as a wedding gift. Fiona's parents, who seemed nice enough whenever we met, agreed to pay for the construction of a house on that land for the young couple. As the months passed after the wedding, Fiona and Dylan's daily visits started feeling less like family catch-ups and more like routine inspections. They'd drop by, always around mealtimes. While I didn't mind feeding them, what's a mother for if not to make sure her kids are fed? It started to wear on me and Arthur. It wasn't just the eating, it was the taking. Little things from the pantry, leftovers packed up before I could even offer. It felt like our home had become their personal grocery store. One evening, they were at it again, rummaging through the fridge while Arthur and I exchanged looks over the kitchen counter. I could see Arthur was getting fed up, his jaw tightening every time the fridge door swung open. Dylan, I finally said, a bit sharper than I intended, you two have got to start managing on your own. We can't keep your fridge stocked forever. Dylan, holding a Tupperware of last night's roast, looked up, surprised. Oh, come on, Mom. It's not a big deal. We're just grabbing some stuff. Saves us a trip to the store. Fiona, all smiles as usual, chimed in. Yeah, Mabel, we really appreciate it. Things have just been so hectic with work and the house plans. We're stretched a bit thin. I sighed, leaning against the counter. I get it. Starting out is tough, but you've got to learn to stand on your own. We've done our part. Now it's your turn. Arthur, never one to sugarcoat, dropped the bomb. It's about respect, kids. You can't just come here and take what you want. What are we, a charity? Here's the revised version of the passages. Fiona's smile faded, and Dylan's face darkened. We didn't mean anything by it, Dylan muttered, placing the Tupperware back with less care than usual. That night, after they left earlier than usual, I sat down with Arthur, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. Did we do the right thing, Arthur, pushing back like that? Arthur, ever the advocate of tough love, put his arm around me. AV, if we don't set limits, who will? They got to grow up sometime. Their visits stopped for a while after that conversation. It stung, but maybe it was necessary. The next few months were quiet, the kind of quiet that leaves you thinking too much. Then one day, out of the blue, Dylan called. Mom, Fiona's pregnant. You're going to be a grandma. My heart leaped. Despite everything, this was wonderful news. Oh, Dylan, that's amazing. Congratulations. If you need anything at all, you know you can ask. True to my word, I became more involved than ever. Fiona needed help with cleaning and grocery shopping, and I was more than happy to step in. "You're a lifesaver, Mabel," Fiona often said. "You really get it, unlike my own mom." Her words made me pause. "Fiona, maybe I should talk to your mom? Clear the air." Fiona quickly shook her head. "No, please, that would just make things worse. Let's leave it." When Isla was born, my world lit up in ways I never expected. I was overjoyed and ready to spoil my granddaughter. But soon, Dylan and Fiona started leaning on me a bit too hard, turning my joy into almost a full-time job. One day, not long after Isla came home from the hospital, Dylan asked me something that caught me completely off guard. "Mom, can you watch Isla while Fiona goes back to work? Or maybe help pay for a babysitter?" He said it like it was no big deal. I was stunned. "Why can't you two handle this on your own? You both work, yet you're always asking for help. And all those new things I see at your place. How do you afford that but not childcare?" Dylan didn't like my response. He fired back. "If you can't help, maybe you won't see Isla as much. How would you feel about that?" His words hurt. I couldn't believe he'd use Isla against me, but I wasn't about to let that strain my relationship with my granddaughter. "Fine," I said, trying to keep calm. "I'll help, but we need to figure out something more sustainable." That help quickly turned into me watching Isla nearly every day. Fiona and Dylan would drop her off early, often before I'd had my first cup of coffee, and pick her up just in time for bed. Before I knew it, my days were all about Isla, from meals to playtime to naps. As Isla grew and started school, my role shifted from full-time caregiver to chauffeur and after-school guardian. I picked her up from school, helped with homework, and made sure she had a good dinner. I loved doing these things, but it wasn't something I'd planned on. Meanwhile, Dylan and Fiona seemed to settle into this arrangement a little too comfortably. Weekends away, evenings out, and little vacations became their norm, with Isla left in our care. We cherished our time with Isla, but Arthur and I couldn't shake the feeling of being taken for granted. The more we did, the more they expected. Arthur and I started noticing more and more new gadgets and clothes in Dylan and Fiona's home. One evening, as I handed Isla over to Dylan after another long day, I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Dylan, you and Fiona seem to be living quite well. New watches, clothes. It's a bit much, don't you think? Meanwhile, I'm covering Isla's necessities. That doesn't seem right." Dylan got defensive, as usual. "Mom, we're just trying to give Isla the best. You want that for her, right? Giving her the best doesn't mean leaving all the responsibility to us." I shot back. "You need to take care of your own family. It's not fair to push it all onto us." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We really appreciate everything you do, Mom. We'll try to do better." But better never came. Arthur and I ended up buying clothes and toys for Isla, paying for her school supplies, and essentially providing for her as if she were our own child again. We loved her deeply, but we were exhausted, both emotionally and financially. It was past midnight when the phone by my bedside rang. I grabbed it, my heart racing. It was Isla, whispering, "Grandma, I'm scared. I'm all alone at home, and I can't sleep." My mind raced as I jumped out of bed. "Stay on the phone with me, sweetheart," I said, quickly throwing on some clothes. Arthur was already up, grabbing the car keys. We drove over to Dylan and Fiona's house in a hurry. When we pulled up, the place was dark, too quiet. My hand shook with a mix of anger and fear as we approached the door. Inside, Isla ran to me, nearly knocking me over with her hug. "They went to a party," she said, her voice muffled against my coat. I called Dylan, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where are you?" Isla's been alone and scared. Dylan's response was slurred and dismissive. "Mom, calm down. It's no big deal. We do this sometimes. She's fine." "Fine? It's not fine, Dylan. You left your daughter alone at night." I snapped, my voice rising. He hung up, leaving me fuming while Arthur paced the living room. We decided to stay with Isla until morning, Not that we could have slept anyway. The next day, after making sure Isla was safe at school, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go. I drove to the next city to see Clara and her husband, Fiona's parents. They needed to know what was happening. Sitting in their living room, I laid it all out. Clara, did you know Isla was left alone last night? That Dylan and Fiona often leave her by herself? Clara's face went pale. What? No, we had no idea. We thought. I didn't stop. And there's something else. You've been sending money for private schooling and other expenses, right? Well, Isla's almost always with us, and we've been covering her school fees and other costs. Clara and her husband exchanged stunned looks. We send them $50,000 a year for her schooling, Clara whispered, shock and betrayal clear in her voice. They've been lying to you. They keep the money, saying it's for Isla, while we've been taking care of her. It's all been a sham, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The room felt heavy as they absorbed the truth. This is fraud, Mabel. They're stealing from us and using Isla in their scheme, Clara's husband finally said, his tone hardened. I nodded, determined. We need to act for Isla's sake and for ours. We can't let this continue. We're with you, Clara said, locking eyes with me. A new resolve formed between us. This ends now. I left their house with a heavy heart, the drive home filled with mixed emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a grim satisfaction that we were finally going to hold Dylan and Fiona accountable. The very next morning, I contacted a lawyer and the local social services. This had gone too far. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about Isla's safety. The lawyer, a no-nonsense man named Graham, laid out our options, and social services shared our concerns. They scheduled an immediate visit to Dylan and Fiona's house. Arthur and I knew we had to be there too, to confront this head-on. When we arrived, Fiona opened the door, her face twisted with anger. What are you doing, Mabel? Bringing social workers here. They're asking why we leave Isla alone. She snapped, her voice sharp and accusing. I kept my composure despite the anger bubbling inside me. We're here for Isla's well-being, Fiona. That's our only concern, I replied, keeping my voice steady. The social workers were already conducting their inspection, and it didn't take long for them to notice several red flags. One of them pulled me aside. This is serious. We've observed enough to file a report on child neglect and failure of parental duties, she whispered, clutching her clipboard tightly. Fiona overheard and lashed out, her voice dripping with venom. You have no right, Mabel. Because of you, they're saying we might lose our daughter. You won't see her again. I'll make sure of it. Dylan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his tone icy and cutting. Mom, you've really crossed the line this time. I can't believe you'd turn against your own family. I'm done with you. I swallowed hard, trying to push past the hurt. This isn't about us, Dylan. It's about Isla, about keeping her safe. Just then, the door opened and Clara and her husband walked in. I had called them for support. Fiona's face went pale, her confidence fading. Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. Fiona, we know everything. The money, the lies. You've been deceiving all of us. We're here to put an end to it. Dylan and Fiona fell silent, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. I cleared my throat to get everyone's attention. The room went still as I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of documents. All eyes were on me as I handed them to Dylan and Fiona. Here, I said firmly, pushing the papers across the table. These are your disinheritance papers, and alongside them, the lawsuit we filed for compensation after years of your deceit. I saw the shock wash over Dylan as he fumbled with the documents, clearly struggling to process what was happening. Beside him, Fiona looked like she might faint. And there's more, I continued, my voice firm and unwavering. We're also selling the piece of land we gave you for your wedding. Fortunately, it's still in my name. Before they could respond, Fiona's parents stepped forward, their expressions hardened. They handed Fiona their own set of documents, the weight of their betrayal evident in their eyes. "And these," her father said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and disappointment, "are your disinheritance papers from us, Fiona. We're also demanding the return of all the funds you've misused." Fiona's reaction was immediate. "There's no money left. We spent it all," she cried hysterically, her hands shaking. Dylan stood next to her, silent, his face frozen in shock and helplessness. As the tension in the room thickened, I took a deep breath and delivered the final blow. "We're also seeking to strip you both of parental rights," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We've spoken to Isla, and she wants to stay with us permanently. We plan to take full custody and eventually adopt her." Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Fiona, who had been sobbing uncontrollably, suddenly stopped. She looked up with a calculating gaze and said, "What if we make a deal? Give us $500,000, and we'll let Isla stay with you without any more trouble." The audacity of her proposal left the room in stunned silence. Arthur, who had been quietly supporting me, clenched his fist, visibly furious at the suggestion. Fiona's parents were the first to break the silence. Her father, face flushed with a mix of shame and rage, spoke up. "To think we raised someone who would sell her own child. We disown you, Fiona." At that moment, the social workers intervened, outlining the steps needed to transfer guardianship legally and ethically, without any exchange of money. Fiona and Dylan didn't put up much of a fight after that. It seemed they had given up. As we walked out, I felt a mix of sadness for the people my son and his wife had become, and determination for what lay ahead. Our priority was clear: protecting Isla and giving her the stable, loving home she deserved, far from the greed that had shadowed her young life. With the court battles behind us and the dust finally settling, Arthur and I stepped into a new chapter, one we hadn't planned for, but were ready to embrace with all the love we had. We were officially Isla's guardians. The path to get here had been painful, but the outcome brought a sense of relief. One quiet evening, as we sat on the porch watching Isla chase fireflies in the yard, Arthur broke the comfortable silence. "You think we did the right thing, Evie?" I looked at him, noticing the lines of worry that had softened into a smile as he watched Isla. "Yes, Arthur, we did what was right for her. Look, Grandma, look what I caught." I laughed, taking the jar and peering inside. "They're beautiful, sweetheart, just like you." She beamed, soaking in the praise, then turned to Arthur. "Grandpa, can we let them go now? I think they want to fly." "Of course, kiddo," Arthur said, stretching his legs and following her down the steps to release the fireflies into the evening sky. Later that week, I sat down with Isla to talk about the upcoming school year. "Are you excited to start at your new school?" I asked, laying out the new supplies we had picked up together. She nodded, her expression serious. "Yeah, but I'm a little scared. What if the other kids don't like me?" I gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You just be yourself. They're going to love you as much as we do." Isla smiled, a bit reassured, then her face grew thoughtful. "Grandma, do you think Mom and Dad are okay?" "I think they're learning a lot right now, sweetheart, just like we all are. But remember, Grandpa and I are here for you always." As fall rolled in and Isla settled into her new routine, Arthur and I attended school events, helped with homework, and built a new rhythm around our granddaughter's needs. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Arthur raised his glass in a small toast. "To new beginnings and to family, the ones we're born into and the ones we make along the way." I raised my glass to his, our eyes meeting across the table. "To family," I echoed. Isla, not wanting to be left out, raised her milk glass with a giggle. "To family." The laughter that followed was light and genuine, filling the room with warmth.